The alarm rang through the Mars orbital station at 3 in the morning. Admiral Minho Kang was already awake, staring at the red emergency signal flashing on his personal screen. He had been in the military for 30 years, and he knew that sound meant something bad was happening somewhere in the galaxy. He pulled on his uniform and rushed to the command center. The large room was already filled with officers running between stations, checking data and talking in urgent voices. Commander Hannah Park stood near the main display screen, her face tight with worry. "What do we have?" Minho asked as he approached her. Hannah pointed to the screen. "Distress signal from the Velkari Empire, sir. It came in 20 minutes ago. The message is broken up, but we managed to clean it enough to understand what they're saying." She pressed a button, and a voice filled the room. It was high-pitched and crackling with static, but the fear in it was clear. "This is Velkari Prime. Under attack. Krethic swarm. Planetary shields failing. Need help. Anyone. Please." The message cut off and started again from the beginning. Minho felt his stomach tighten. The Velkari were peaceful traders. They never got involved in wars. They had no enemies. If they were calling for help, things must be very bad. "The Krethic swarm," Minho said quietly. "How many ships?" Hannah's fingers moved across her control panel. "Our long-range sensors are picking up thousands of signatures in their system. Maybe more. The swarm is surrounding their homeworld. According to the message timestamp and what we know about their shield technology, they have about 72 hours before complete collapse." 72 hours, Minho repeated. He looked at the star map on the screen. The Velkari system was marked in red, far out on the edge of known space. "How long to reach them?" 6 days at maximum fleet speed, Hannah said. Her voice was flat, emotionless, but Minho could see the pain in her eyes. "We'd be too late." Minho stood silently for a moment. Around him, the command center continued its organized chaos. Young officers checked fuel levels, weapon systems, and ship readiness. They all knew what the numbers meant. They would arrive to find nothing but debris and empty planets stripped of all life. "Sir," Hannah said carefully, "the Galactic Council has already responded to the Velkari request. All major powers have declined to send aid. The distance is too great, and the Velkari have no military alliances. The Council's official statement is that intervention would be strategically unsound." "Strategically unsound," Minho said, tasting the words like bitter medicine. "That's what they call letting an entire civilization die?" He walked to the main display and studied the map. Earth's territories were marked in blue, spread across several star systems. Their military fleet was strong, the result of decades of building and training after humanity had finally united under one government. 12 carrier groups, over 1,000 ships. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, and all of it was positioned to defend Earth's interests. "Get me Captain Yuna Choi," Minho said suddenly, "and start calculating a new jump route. I want every ship we have ready to move in 6 hours. Hannah's eyes went wide. "Sir? You're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Commander. I'm giving orders. Wake up the entire fleet. We're going to Velkari Prime." "But Admiral, that would leave our territories almost completely undefended. The Council will never approve this. Earth itself could be vulnerable. We'd be risking everything for a species that can't even help us in return." Minho turned to face her. "I know exactly what we'd be risking, but tell me something, Hannah. When did we become the kind of people who hear someone screaming for help and just turn away because it's not convenient?" Before Hannah could answer, Captain Yuna Choi entered the command center. She was younger than Minho, only 42, but she had proven herself in 3 major conflicts. Her uniform was perfectly pressed even at this early hour, and her eyes were sharp and alert. "Admiral," she said with a quick salute. "I heard the alert. What are our orders?" "We're deploying the full fleet to Velkari Prime," Minho said. "The entire system is under attack by the Krethic swarm. We have 6 days to get there, and they have 72 hours before their shields fail." Yuna didn't hesitate. Understood. I'll have the Indomitable ready within 4 hours. What about the other carrier groups? All of them, Minho said. Every ship that can fly, every carrier, destroyer, cruiser, and support vessel. We're taking the whole fleet. Now, Yuna did pause. She looked at Hana, then back at Minho. Sir, the Earth Council will need to approve a deployment of this size. The political implications alone. I'll handle the council, Minho said. You handle the fleet. I want departure in 6 hours. Can you do it? Yuna's face hardened into determination. Yes, sir. We'll be ready. As Yuna left to begin preparations, Minho turned to the communications station. Get me a direct line to Earth Council chambers. Priority Alpha. The next 2 hours were some of the hardest of Minho's career. The Earth Council argued, shouted, and demanded explanations. They called his plan reckless. They said he was throwing away humanity's security for strangers. They threatened to remove him from command. But Minho stood firm. He reminded them of Earth's own history, of the times when humanity had needed help and received none. He talked about the kind of species they wanted to be in this galaxy. He made them look at the numbers, the cold reality of what would happen if the Krethic swarm consumed the Velkari system and then moved on to the next target, and the next. We didn't survive Earth's wars, the collapse, and the rebuilding just to become another cold, calculating empire, Minho told them. We're better than that. We have to be better than that. In the end, it was the younger council members who swayed the vote. They had grown up hearing stories of the old Earth, of heroes who risked everything to save others. They voted to approve the deployment by the smallest possible margin. 6 hours after the distress signal arrived, the human fleet began to move. 12 carrier groups, accompanied by their support vessels, escorts, and supply ships. Over 1,200 vessels in total, more than 90% of humanity's military strength. As the Indomitable prepared for the jump to faster-than-light speed, Minho stood on the bridge next to Captain Yuna. Through the viewing screen, he could see the other ships of the fleet, their engines glowing bright as they charged their jump drives. All ships report ready, Admiral, Yuna said quietly. Minho nodded. Send a message to the Velkari. Tell them, hold on. Humanity is coming. The message was transmitted across the void of space, traveling at the speed of light toward a dying civilization that had given up hope. Then, as one, the human fleet jumped. They tore through normal space and entered the strange realm of faster-than-light travel, beginning a desperate race against time. Behind them, Earth's territories sat quiet and vulnerable. Ahead of them, an entire species waited to die. And between them lay 6 days of the hardest flying any human crew had ever attempted. The human fleet moved through faster-than-light space, like a spear thrown across the galaxy. Inside the ships, crews worked without rest, pushing their vessels beyond what the manuals said was safe. Engineer Doyen Lim stood in the engine room of the Indomitable, watching the massive reactor cores pulse with barely contained energy. Sweat dripped down his face, despite the cooling systems running at full power. The temperature in the room was 15 degrees higher than normal. Engine output at 130%, his assistant called out over the roar of the machinery. Core temperature rising. I can see that, Doyen shouted back. Reroute power from the secondary cooling system. Push it all into the drive coils. Sir, if we do that and something goes wrong, then we fix it, Doyen said firmly. We didn't come all this way to show up late. Keep pushing. On the bridge, Lieutenant Jiho Nam sat at his tactical station, studying the data they had received from the Velkari distress signal. He was young, only 25, but he had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed. His fingers moved across his screen, replaying the broken transmission over and over. Captain, he said, looking up at Yuna. I think I found something. Yuna walked over to his station. Show me. Jiho pulled up a display showing the Velkari system. The distress signal included some tactical data about the swarm's attack. Look at the pattern. They're not attacking randomly. They're hitting the shield generators in a specific order, testing each one to find the weakest points. So they're being methodical, Yuna said. More than that, they're learning. Each attack is more precise than the last. The swarm is studying Velkari defenses and they're adapting. Jiho highlighted several points on the map. If this pattern continues, the shields won't last 72 hours. They'll fail in 60, maybe less. Yuna felt her chest tighten. 60 hours meant they would be even later than they thought. She touched her communication badge. Bridge to engineering. Doyun, I need more speed. Captain, we're already past maximum recommended output. Doyun's voice came back, crackling with static. If I push any harder, we might lose engines completely. I know what I'm asking, Yuna said, but we need to shave time off this journey. Whatever you can give us. There was a pause. Then Doyun's voice came back, calmer now. Understood, Captain. Give me 4 hours. I have an idea, but it's going to be dangerous. Across the fleet, other ships were facing their own challenges. Commodore Nari Song, commanding the 2nd Carrier Division, had already lost one destroyer when its engines overheated and failed. The crew had been evacuated just in time, spreading across other ships in her group. We're packed in like cargo, her first officer complained. Every bunk is full, and we've got people sleeping in the hallways. They're alive, Nari said. That's what matters. We'll sort out the crowding when we're not racing against time. Dr. Suji Bay sat in her laboratory aboard the Indomitable, surrounded by screens showing everything humanity knew about the Krethic swarm. It wasn't much. The swarm rarely left survivors, and they never communicated. They simply appeared, consumed everything in their path, and moved on. But Suji had spent her career studying alien species, and she had learned that every creature, no matter how strange, followed certain rules. The swarm was biological, not mechanical. That meant they had needs, weaknesses, and patterns. Computer, show me energy signatures from previous swarm attacks, she said. The screens lit up with data. Suji studied the readings, looking for anything that might help. The swarm ships gave off unusual bioelectric signals. They seemed to pulse in rhythm with each other, as if connected by some invisible network. They're coordinating somehow, she muttered. But how? Chemical signals wouldn't work across the distances involved. Sound doesn't travel in space. So what is it? She worked through the night, drinking too much coffee and barely noticing when her assistant brought her food. Somewhere in this data was an answer. She just had to find it. 4 hours after Yuna's request, Doyun called from the engine room. Captain, I'm ready to try something, but I need to explain it to the Admiral first. It affects the whole fleet. Minutes later, Admiral Minho stood in the engine room with Doyun, looking at a diagram on a portable screen. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, Minho said. Doyun pointed to the diagram. Our faster-than-light drives work by creating a bubble around the ship. The bubble slips through normal space. The bigger the bubble, the more energy it takes to maintain. Okay, Minho said. What if we don't make individual bubbles? What if we create one massive bubble around the entire fleet? We link all our drives together, share the load. It would take less total energy, which means we could go faster. Minho frowned. Has anyone ever tried this? Not at this scale, Doyun admitted. There's a risk. If the bubble fails, every ship could be thrown out of faster-than-light space at the same time. We might end up scattered across dozens of light years. But if it works, we could cut 18 hours off our travel time. Minho looked at the diagram, then at Doyun. The young engineer's eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they were filled with determination. How long to set it up? 6 hours to link all the ship's systems. Another hour to test and activate. Do it, Minho said. But Doyun, if this works, you're getting promoted. The next 6 hours were controlled chaos. Warrant Officer Tae Yang. O took charge of linking the fleet's computer systems. He had to create a network that connected over 1,000 ships, making them act as one coordinated unit. "This is insane," one of his technicians said. "We're basically turning the entire fleet into a single computer." "Not a computer," Tae Yang corrected. "A nervous system. Each ship is like a nerve cell, connected to all the others. When we activate the linked drive, they'll all respond together. And if one ship has a problem, then the whole network compensates. That's the beauty of it. We're not relying on any single ship. We're relying on all of them." As Tae Yang worked, news of the human fleet's mission spread across the galaxy. Other species monitored the fleet's progress with interest and skepticism. The proud Talarian Confederation released a statement calling humanity's response an admirable but ultimately futile gesture of foolish bravado. The ancient Nescoral Collective, a species that had been traveling the stars for 6,000 years, watched in silence. They had seen many young species rise and fall. Most followed predictable patterns: expansion, conflict, either destruction or stagnation. But humanity was doing something unusual. The Nescoril elders discussed it in their vast ships, trying to understand what drove these strange creatures to risk everything for strangers. On the Velkari homeworld, the situation grew more desperate. The planetary shields flickered and weakened with each swarm attack. Chancellor Torvesh stood in the defense center, watching the displays show his world dying by degrees. "How long?" he asked his chief of security. 58 hours, maybe less. The swarm is accelerating their attacks." "And the human fleet?" "They sent a message. They're coming. But Chancellor, even traveling at maximum speed, they can't possibly arrive in time." Torvesh nodded slowly. He had already accepted that his species would die. The message from humanity had been touching, but it changed nothing. The math was simple and cruel. Still, he ordered the message to be broadcast across Velkari Prime. "Humanity is coming," he told his people. "They heard our call, and they're coming. Even if they arrive too late, let it be known that in our final hours, we were not alone." Someone answered. 7 hours after Doyun proposed his plan, the human fleet was ready. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the status board. Every ship in the fleet showed green. They were all connected, all ready. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Captain Yuna said. Minho took a deep breath. "Activate the linked drive. Let's see if this crazy idea works." Taeyang initiated the sequence from his station. Across the fleet, drives hummed in perfect synchronization. The separate bubbles that surrounded each ship began to merge, growing larger and larger until they formed a single massive bubble around the entire fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the bubble collapsed inward, and the fleet surged forward like a stone from a slingshot. Doyen watched his instruments with wide eyes. Speed increasing, 140% of normal maximum, 150. Holding steady at 153%. On the bridge, Jiho recalculated their arrival time. "Admiral, if we maintain this speed, we'll reach Velkari Prime in 4 days and 9 hours. Minho felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Hope. They might actually make it in time. "Maintain current speed," he ordered. "All ships, stay in formation. We're going to make it." Behind them, 3 ships whose engines couldn't handle the strain fell out of the formation. But their crews were evacuated quickly, and the fleet didn't slow down. Ahead of them, the Velkari waited for a miracle they didn't believe would come. And in between, the human fleet raced through the darkness, refusing to give up. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light space at the edge of the Velkari system like an avalanche of metal and fury. 1,200 ships dropped into normal space in perfect formation, their weapons already charging, their shields already up. On the Indomitable's bridge, alarms immediately started screaming. The tactical display lit up with thousands of red dots, each one representing a Krethic swarm vessel. "Contact!" Lieutenant Jiho shouted. "Swarm forces detected. I'm counting 4,300 individual ships. They're surrounding Valkyrie Prime in a sphere formation." Captain Yuna leaned forward in her chair, studying the display. The swarm ships were ugly things, more like flying insects than proper spacecraft. They moved in clusters, their hulls covered in organic plating that pulsed with sickly green light. "Status of the Valkyrie shields?" she asked. "Holding at 18% capacity," Jiho replied, "but they're flickering. I'd say they have less than 6 hours before total collapse." Admiral Minho's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Kang. We didn't come this far to be cautious. Battle stations. Prepare for full engagement." Across the fleet, crews rushed to their positions. Pilots climbed into fighters. Gunners checked their targeting systems. Medical teams prepared their emergency facilities. In the Indomitable's hangar bay, Commander Hyun Shin climbed into her fighter craft. She was the wing commander for the 1st Fighter Division, responsible for 300 pilots. Around her, other pilots were doing their pre-flight checks, their faces tight with concentration. "Listen up," Hyun said over the squadron channel. "The swarm has never fought humans before. They don't know what we can do. Let's teach them." The fighter pilots responded with a chorus of acknowledgments. They were scared, but they were ready. On Valkyrie Prime, Chancellor Torvesh stared at his display in disbelief. The humans had arrived. They were actually here, and they had brought an entire fleet. "How many ships?" he asked. "Over 1,200, Chancellor. They're forming up for an attack run." 1,200 against 4,000, Torvesh said quietly. "They'll be slaughtered." But even as he said it, he felt something he thought was dead. Hope. Admiral Minho studied the tactical situation. The swarm had superior numbers, and they held the defensive position around Valkyrie Prime. A conventional attack would be suicide. Good thing he had no intention of being conventional. "Split the fleet," he ordered. 4 strike groups. Captain Yuna, you'll lead Strike Group Alpha in a frontal assault. Draw their attention. Commodore Nari, take Strike Group Beta and go deep. I want you inside their formation. Yuna heard the order and felt her blood run cold. "Sir, going inside their formation?" "Is exactly what they won't expect," Minho finished. "They'll assume we follow standard galactic combat doctrine. Stay at range. Trade long-distance fire. Retreat if casualties get too high. We're not going to do any of that." Commodore Nari Song heard her orders and smiled grimly. Her strike group Beta consisted of 2 carrier groups and their escorts, about 300 ships total. She would be taking them straight into the heart of the swarm. "You heard the Admiral," she told her captains. "We're going in close, real close. I want every ship ready for point-blank combat." "Commodore, our shields won't last long under that kind of assault," one captain protested. "Then our armor will have to do the job," Nari said. "Human ships are built to take punishment. Time to prove it." The battle began with Yuna's frontal assault. Strike Group Alpha, nearly 400 ships strong, charged straight at the swarm's outer sphere. The swarm reacted exactly as expected, turning thousands of ships to face this threat. Weapons fire lit up the space between the 2 forces. The swarm used biological weapons, launching streams of acidic projectiles and energy beams that burned like green fire. The human ships responded with kinetic weapons and missiles, filling the void with explosive fury. Yuna's flagship took hit after hit, but the shields held. "All ships maintain formation. Keep their attention on us." While the swarm focused on Strike Group Alpha, Commodore Nari made her move. Strike Group Beta accelerated to full speed and dove down, coming at the swarm from below their formation. By the time the swarm noticed, it was too late. Nari's ships plunged into the swarm formation like a knife into flesh. At point-blank range, human weapons were devastating. Kinetic rounds tore through swarm ships' organic armor. Missiles found their targets in seconds instead of minutes. But the swarm fought back viciously. Nari's ships took terrible damage. Shields failed. Armor melted under acid attacks. Ships broke apart, spilling their crews into the void. "Hold the line!" Nari shouted as her own ship shuddered from impacts. "Don't give them an inch." On the Indomitable, Lieutenant Jiho was analyzing the battle data when he saw something important. "Captain, I found their command nodes. The swarm is using specialized ships to coordinate their attacks. If we take those out, they'll lose coordination," Yuna finished. She immediately contacted Commander Hyun Shin. "Hyun, I'm sending you targeting data. Priority targets. I need them destroyed." In her fighter, Hyun received the data and studied it quickly. The command nodes were larger than normal swarm ships and positioned throughout the formation. They would be heavily defended. "All wings form up on me," she ordered. "We've got targets to kill." 300 human fighters broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward the command nodes. The swarm launched their own fighter-sized organisms to intercept, and the space between the fleets became a chaotic mess of small craft combat. Human pilots proved to be something the swarm had never encountered. Most galactic species relied heavily on computer-assisted flying, letting their ship's artificial intelligence handle the complex calculations of combat. But humans preferred manual control. They flew on instinct and reflex, making split-second decisions that no computer could match. Hyun led her wing through the swarm defenses like a needle through cloth. Her fingers danced across the controls, dodging acidic projectiles by margins measured in meters. Behind her, her wingmates followed, trusting her completely. "First target in sight," she called out. "Weapons free?" The command node was a massive ship, 3 times the size of a normal swarm vessel. It pulsed with bioelectric energy, coordinating hundreds of other ships around it. Hyun armed her missiles and fired. The missiles streaked through space and slammed into the command node. It exploded in a shower of green fire and organic debris. Immediately, the swarm ships around it began to move erratically, their coordination broken. "One down," Hyun reported. "Moving to target 2. In her laboratory aboard the Indomitable, Dr. Suji had been studying the battle data. The bioelectric signals she had noticed earlier were stronger now, easier to detect. She could see how the swarm ships communicated, sending pulses of electricity between themselves. "I've got it," she said suddenly. She called the bridge. "Captain, I can disrupt their communication. I need you to give me access to our electromagnetic warfare systems." Yuna didn't hesitate. "You've got it. What do you need?" 10 minutes and a lot of power," Suji said. "You've got 5 minutes and all the power you can use. Make it count." Suji worked faster than she ever had before. Her fingers flew across her controls, creating a jamming frequency that matched the swarm's bioelectric signals. It was delicate work, like tuning a musical instrument while being shot at. 4 minutes and 37 seconds later, she activated her jamming system. "Broadcasting now!" Across the battlefield, the swarm suddenly faltered. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination began to drift. Some collided with each other. Others fired on their own forces by mistake. The invisible network that connected them was screaming with interference. "It's working!" Jiho shouted from his station. "The swarm's attack patterns are breaking down!" Admiral Minho saw his opportunity. "All strike groups, full assault. Hit them while they're confused. Press the advantage." The human fleet surged forward as one. Ships that had been taking defensive positions suddenly went on the attack. Fighters that had been dodging now pursued. The momentum of the battle shifted. Engineer Doyen worked frantically in the engine room, keeping the Indomitable's damaged systems running. Explosions had knocked out 2 of the main power conduits, and he was rerouting power through backup systems that were never meant to handle this kind of load. We're losing power to the forward shields, someone shouted. Transfer power from life support, Doyen ordered. We can breathe in emergency suits if we have to. Sir, that's against regulations. Regulations don't matter if we're dead. Do it. The battle raged for 19 hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed. Space was filled with debris and the bodies of the dead. But slowly, steadily, the humans pushed forward. Commodore Nari's Strike Group Beta had taken the worst casualties. Of the 300 ships she had led into the swarm formation, only 211 were still fighting. But those remaining ships fought with a fury that terrified the swarm. They refused to retreat. They refused to surrender. When their shields failed, they fought on armor. When their armor melted, they rammed swarm ships rather than die passively. Warrant Officer Taiyang. Coordinated damage control across the fleet, directing repair teams to critical systems and helping crippled ships stay in the fight. He saved dozens of ships that should have been abandoned, keeping them operational through quick thinking and desperate improvisations. Finally, after 19 hours of brutal combat, the swarm broke. The remaining ships suddenly turned and fled, abandoning the battlefield and jumping to faster-than-light speed. Admiral Minho watched them go and resisted the urge to pursue. His fleet had won, but they had paid a heavy price. All ships, stand down from combat status. Begin rescue and recovery operations. On Velkari Prime, Chancellor Torvesh watched the last swarm ship disappear from his sensors. His homeworld was saved. His people would live. And it was because a species they barely knew had risked everything to help them. He sat down slowly, his legs suddenly unable to support him, and for the first time in 3 days, he allowed himself to cry. The silence after the battle was almost as terrible as the fighting had been. The human fleet hung in orbit around Velkari Prime, battered and bleeding but victorious. Debris from destroyed ships drifted through space like metal snow. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the casualty reports with red, tired eyes. She had been awake for over 30 hours, and every bone in her body ached, but she couldn't rest. Not yet. "Final count?" she asked quietly. Lieutenant Jiho's voice was hollow. 127 ships destroyed. 3,847 crew members confirmed dead. Another 2,000 injured, with 400 of those in critical condition. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. Almost 4,000 dead. 4,000 people who had families waiting for them back on Earth. 4,000 people who had answered the call and paid the ultimate price. "Get me Admiral Kang," she said. On the flagship's observation deck, Admiral Minho stood looking out at the damaged fleet. Each destroyed ship was a failure in his mind. He had ordered these people here. He had told them to risk their lives for strangers. And now thousands of them would never go home. "Admiral," Yuna's voice came through his communication device. "Chancellor Torvesh is requesting permission to come aboard. He wants to meet with you personally." "Tell him I'll meet him in the main hangar in 30 minutes, Minho said. "And Yuna, good work. You saved a lot of lives today." "Not enough," she said quietly. 30 minutes later, a small Velkari shuttle docked with the Indomitable. Chancellor Torvesh emerged, flanked by 2 guards. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything. His robes were scorched and dirty from the siege. Admiral Minho waited for him in the hangar, still wearing his battle-stained uniform. The 2 leaders faced each other in silence for a moment. Then Torvesh did something that shocked every human present. He dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the floor. "Chancellor, please," Minho said quickly, moving forward. "That's not necessary." "You don't understand," Torvesh said, his voice breaking. "My species was dying. We had accepted our fate. Every major power in the galaxy turned away from us. We were alone, waiting for the end. And then you came. You risked everything. You lost thousands of your people, for us, for strangers. Minho gently helped Torvesh to his feet. That's what you do when someone needs help. You help them. But why? Torvesh asked. What do you want from us? Territory? Resources? Political alliances? Name your price. The Velkari are in your debt. Minho looked into the Chancellor's eyes. I want you to do the same thing the next time someone calls for help. That's all. Pass it forward. Torvesh stared at him in confusion. That's all? You want nothing else? That's all, Minho confirmed. Help others when they need it. That's payment enough. The Chancellor stood silently for a long moment, processing this. Finally, he spoke. You have no idea what you've done here today, Admiral. You've shown the galaxy something it has forgotten. You've reminded us what it means to be civilized. While Minho met with the Velkari leader, Dr. Yunji Lee was already on the surface of Velkari Prime, setting up emergency medical facilities. She was the fleet's chief medical officer, and she had brought with her every doctor, nurse, and medical technician who could be spared. The Velkari had taken severe casualties during the siege. Their hospitals were overwhelmed, and their medical supplies were nearly exhausted. Yunji organized her teams with practiced efficiency, turning an empty warehouse into a functioning hospital in just 4 hours. We're getting reports of thousands of wounded in the northern cities, one of her doctors reported. The local hospitals can't handle them all. Then we'll go to them, Yunji said. Set up mobile medical units. I want teams in every major city within 12 hours. A Velkari doctor approached her hesitantly. Dr. Lee, I must ask, why are you prioritizing our wounded over your own? Your ship has hundreds of injured crew members. Yunji looked at him seriously. Our injured are stable and being treated. Your people are dying right now. We'll take care of our own after we help yours. That's how this works. The Velkari doctor's eyes filled with tears. He had been working without sleep for 3 days, watching patients die because he didn't have enough supplies or staff. And now these humans, who had just lost thousands of their own people, were putting his patients first. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread quickly. Other species watched recordings of the fight, analyzed the tactics, and tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The Talarian Confederation, who had called humanity's mission foolish bravado, found themselves facing difficult questions from their own citizens. Why had they refused to help the Velkari? Why had it taken a younger, smaller species to do what was right? The ancient Nescaril collective gathered in their council chambers to discuss what they had observed. The eldest among them, a being who had lived for 3,000 years, spoke to the assembly. In all my time observing the younger species of this galaxy, I have never seen anything quite like this. Humanity could have ignored the distress call. They could have made excuses about distance or strategic concerns. Instead, they risked their entire military force. They suffered terrible losses, and when offered payment, they asked only that the favor be passed forward. This is not the behavior of an empire. This is the behavior of heroes. In the Indomitable's medical bay, Commodore Nari Song lay in a bed with bandages covering half her body. Her flagship had been destroyed in the final hours of the battle, and she had barely escaped. 17 of her bridge crew had died. Admiral Minho visited her in the recovery ward. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a planet, Nari said with a weak smile. But I'll live. Unlike too many of my people. You led the most dangerous attack of the battle, Minho said. Your strike group broke their formation. Without that, we might have lost. We lost 111 ships from my group alone, Nari said, her voice turning hard. That's 111 crews who trusted me to bring them home, and I failed them. You didn't fail anyone, Minho said firmly. You gave them a mission, and they executed it perfectly. They knew the risks. They went anyway. That's not failure. That's courage. Nari turned her face away. "Tell that to their families." "I will," Minho said. "I'm going to personally contact every single family. I'm going to tell them that their loved ones saved an entire civilization. I'm going to make sure they know that the sacrifice mattered." And he did. Over the next week, Admiral Minho sent personal messages to the families of every crew member who had died. He didn't use form letters or generic condolences. He learned their names, their stories, their dreams. He made sure each family knew their loss was not just a number in a report. On the 5th day after the battle, something remarkable happened. The first ship to arrive at Velkari Prime was not a human vessel. It was a transport from the Velkari's neighbors, the Renok people. They brought medical supplies and food. "We heard what happened," the Renok captain told Chancellor Torvesh. "We heard how the humans risked everything to save you. We're ashamed we didn't help. We want to make it right." The next day, 3 more ships arrived from 3 different species. Then 5 more the day after that. Within a week, there were vessels from 20 different civilizations in orbit around Velkari Prime, all bringing aid and support. Engineer Doyen's innovative faster-than-light linking system had been recorded during the journey. Now, engineering teams from a dozen species were studying the data, marveling at the solution. Doyen found himself giving lectures to alien engineers who wanted to learn human techniques. "We don't have the most advanced technology," he admitted during one lecture, "but we're really good at making things work when they probably shouldn't. We call it creative problem solving. You might call it controlled chaos." The alien engineers laughed, but they were taking notes. Warrant Officer Tae Yang's fleet-wide communication network became the talk of military strategists across the galaxy. What he had created in desperation was actually a revolutionary approach to fleet coordination. 3 species formally requested permission to study his methods. Lieutenant Jiho's tactical analysis of the swarm's attack patterns was being taught at military academies. His ability to find patterns in chaos had proven invaluable, and now other species wanted to learn from his approach. Commander Hyun Shin and her fighter pilots became celebrities. Videos of their combat maneuvers spread across galactic networks. Young pilots from other species watched in awe as humans performed moves that seemed to defy physics. "How do they do it?" one alien cadet asked his instructor. "They train constantly," the instructor replied. "And they trust each other absolutely. Every pilot knows their wingmate will be exactly where they need to be. That kind of coordination takes years to develop." But the biggest impact was something less tangible. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that doing the right thing was more important than doing the safe thing. 3 weeks after the battle, Chancellor Torvesh made a formal announcement. The Velkari Empire was proposing a new alliance, one based not on trade agreements or military power, but on a simple principle: when someone calls for help, we answer. He called it the Mutual Defense Initiative, and he invited humanity to be its founding member alongside the Velkari. "We cannot change what we are," Torvesh said in his speech. "The Velkari are not warriors. We never will be. But we can help in other ways. We can share our knowledge, our resources, our support. And when the next crisis comes, we will stand together." Admiral Minho listened to the speech from the Indomitable's bridge. When it ended, he looked at Captain Yuna. "What do you think?" "I think we started something important," Yuna said. "I think those 4,000 people who died might have changed the galaxy." "Then we better make sure it was worth it," Minho said. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Velkari Prime, and the galaxy was a different place. Admiral Minho Kang stood in the main conference hall of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching representatives from 23 different species sign the Mutual Defense Initiative Charter. The station hung in neutral space, a joint construction project that had been completed in record time with help from a dozen civilizations. Captain Yuna Choi stood beside him, wearing her dress uniform for the ceremony. "Did you ever imagine it would grow this fast?" she asked quietly. "No," Minho admitted. "I thought we might get 5 or 6 species interested. Maybe 10 if we were lucky. But 23? And there are 15 more waiting to join once we finish processing their applications." The signing ceremony was formal but emotional. Each species representative spoke about why they were joining the initiative. Some had been inspired by humanity's actions. Others were ashamed they hadn't helped the Velkari themselves. All of them agreed that the galaxy needed to change. Chancellor Torvesh was the first to sign, using a pen that Minho had given him. It was a simple writing instrument, nothing fancy, but it had belonged to one of the human crew members who had died during the battle. The family had asked that it be used for something important. "This pen belonged to Ensign Kira Huang," Torvesh said as he signed. She was 23 years old. She died when her ship's engine room exploded, but she stayed at her post long enough to evacuate her crewmates first. "I sign this charter in her memory, and in memory of all who gave their lives to save my people." Other species followed, each adding their signatures. The document stated simply that any member species would respond to distress calls from others, sharing military forces, medical aid, and resources as needed. There were no complicated trade agreements or political arrangements, just a promise to help. When the ceremony ended, the real work began. Admiral Minho had been appointed as the initiative's supreme commander, a role he had tried to refuse before being convinced that someone needed to coordinate the combined forces. Lieutenant Jiho Nam, now promoted to commander, worked in the Strategic Planning Division. His job was to develop new tactical doctrines that combined the strengths of different species. It was challenging work. Each species had their own way of fighting, their own strengths and weaknesses. "The Velkari are excellent at defensive operations," he explained during a planning meeting. "Their shield technology is the best in the galaxy. The Renok have superior sensors and can detect threats earlier than anyone else. The Holland species are masters of stealth warfare." "And humans?" asked a Velkari officer. Jiho smiled slightly. "Humans are good at the impossible. We're the ones you call when something needs to be done and everyone else says it can't be." Captain Yuna had taken charge of the initiative's training programs. Her first class of mixed-species officers had been skeptical at first. Human combat doctrine seemed reckless, even suicidal, to species that preferred careful planning and minimal risk. But Yuna had changed their minds by showing them the method behind the apparent madness. "We train harder than anyone else," she explained to a class of 40 officers from 12 different species. "We drill until our responses are automatic. We learn to trust our crewmates with our lives. And we never, ever give up. That's not reckless. That's disciplined aggression." She showed them combat recordings from the Battle of Velkari Prime, breaking down each decision and explaining the reasoning. The alien officers began to understand. What looked like chaos was actually carefully controlled violence. Every move had a purpose. One Talarian officer raised a tentacle. "Captain Choi, during this engagement, your ship's shields were at 3%. Any logical commander would have retreated. Why didn't you?" "Because my ship's weapons were still at 60%, Yuna replied. "And the enemy command node we were targeting was almost destroyed. Retreating would have wasted the sacrifice of the ships that got us to that position, so we finished the job." "But you could have died." "Yes," Yuna said simply. "But we didn't. And because we didn't retreat, we took out that command node and saved hundreds of other ships. Sometimes the right choice is the dangerous one." Dr. Suji Bay ran the initiative's research division, studying potential threats before they became crises. Her team was diverse, including xenobiologists, physicists, and tactical analysts from 15 species. Together, they were creating a database of every known hostile species in the galaxy, looking for patterns and weaknesses. The Krethik swarm hasn't attacked anyone since Velkari Prime, one of her researchers reported. They've completely withdrawn to their home territory. They're learning, Suji said. They encountered something unexpected, and now they're processing that information. The question is, what will they do with it? 3 months after the Battle of Velkari Prime, the swarm had sent an emissary. It was the first time in recorded history that they had communicated with other species. The emissary was a modified swarm organism, smaller than their warships, but still larger than most beings. It had one question. Why did you fight for the Velkari? They cannot help you. They cannot repay you. Why risk your existence for theirs? Admiral Minho had met with the emissary personally. Because they asked for help. Because we could provide it. Because it was the right thing to do. The emissary had been silent for a long time, processing this. Finally, it said, "The hive mind does not understand, but it will remember. We will not attack your territories or those of your allies. We will remain in our space." It wasn't a friendship, but it was peace. And sometimes peace was enough. Engineer Do-Yun Lim now held the position of Fleet Engineering Director. His linked, faster-than-light drive system had been refined and improved with help from alien engineers. Ships from multiple species could now travel together in coordinated, faster-than-light bubbles, making rapid response times possible across vast distances. "I never thought my crazy idea during a crisis would become standard technology," Do-Yun said during an interview with a galactic news service. "But that's kind of how humans work. We get desperate. We try something insane. And sometimes it actually works." Warrant Officer Taeyang. Oh, promoted to lieutenant, ran the initiative's communications network. His system connected hundreds of ships from dozens of species, allowing them to coordinate like a single organism. It was complex work, made harder by the fact that different species used different communication protocols. "It's like trying to make 20 different languages work together in real time," he explained to a visiting delegation. "But that's the beauty of it. We're not trying to make everyone the same. We're trying to make everyone work together despite being different." Dr. Yoonji Lee's medical corps had expanded dramatically. It now included healers and doctors from 30 different species, each bringing their own medical knowledge. Together, they were making breakthroughs that no single species could have achieved alone. "The Velkari understand shield technology better than anyone," Yoonji explained during a medical conference. "We applied that knowledge to protective medical barriers for surgeries in hostile environments. The Holland species have incredible regeneration abilities. We're studying their biology to improve healing techniques for other species. Everyone contributes something unique." Commodore Nari Song, fully recovered from her injuries, commanded the Rapid Response Fleet. This was a permanent task force of 200 ships from multiple species, ready to deploy within hours to anywhere in Allied space. Her crews trained constantly, running drills that would have seemed impossible before Velkari Prime. "We're not just a military force," Nari told her officers during one briefing. "We're a rescue service, a medical team, and a peacekeeping force all in one. Our job is to arrive when people need help and make sure they get it." Her fleet included ships from 12 different species, all training in the hybrid combat doctrine that Jiho had developed. They learned to combine the defensive strength of Velkari shields with the stealth capabilities of Holland ships and the aggressive tactics of human vessels. The result was a force that was greater than the sum of its parts. Each species covered the weaknesses of the others. Each species enhanced the strengths of their allies. 4 months after the initiative was founded, they faced their first test. A mining colony in the Helios sector sent a distress call. They were under attack by raiders. The response was immediate. 7 species volunteered their ships. The debate wasn't whether to help, but who would get to go. In the end, Commodore Nari's Rapid Response Fleet deployed with support from Velkari shield ships and Renok sensor platforms. They arrived at the colony in 18 hours. The raiders took one look at the multi-species fleet and surrendered without firing a shot. Word had spread about what happened to the Krethic swarm at Velkari Prime. No one wanted to face the initiative in combat. The mining colonists were saved with 0 casualties. It was a perfect operation, and it proved that the initiative worked. More distress calls followed over the months. Each time, the initiative responded. Sometimes they arrived to find the crisis was already resolved. Sometimes they arrived just in time. And sometimes, despite their best efforts, they arrived too late. But they always came. That was the promise. When someone called for help, the galaxy would answer. The old powers watched this new alliance with mixed feelings. The Talarian Confederation, who had once mocked humanity's response to Velkari Prime, quietly applied to join the initiative. Their application included a formal apology for their earlier statements. Admiral Minho accepted their application personally. "We don't hold grudges," he told the Talarian ambassador. "Everyone deserves a chance to do better." Welcome to the initiative. The ancient Nescaril collective didn't join the initiative, but they became its strongest supporters. They used their influence to encourage other species to consider membership. In their 6,000 years of observing the galaxy, they had never seen an alliance quite like this one. "Most alliances are built on mutual benefit," one Nescaril elder explained. "Species join because they get something in return. The initiative is different. Species join because they want to give something. They want to be part of something larger than themselves." 9 months after the Battle of Velkari Prime, Admiral Minho stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, looking out at the ships docked there, vessels from 40 different species, all flying the initiative's flag alongside their own national symbols. Captain Yuna joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him. "Long day?" "Long 9 months," Minho replied. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real. We went from one desperate rescue mission to a galactic alliance." "You think it will last?" Yuna asked. Minho was quiet for a moment, watching a human destroyer dock next to a Velkari cruiser. Their crews would mingle in the station's common areas, sharing stories and building friendships across species lines. "You know what Chancellor Torvesh told me last week?" Minho said. "He said the Velkari have already responded to 3 distress calls from species they'd never met before. They took our message seriously. Pass it forward. Help the next person who needs it." He took a sip of his coffee. "As long as we keep that spirit alive, as long as we remember why we built this, yes, I think it will last." A new distress signal came through the station's communication system. A science vessel had suffered a catastrophic engine failure and was drifting in deep space. They had 12 hours of life support remaining. Before Admiral Minho could even give orders, 5 ships from the docked fleet were already requesting permission to launch. One of them was a Talarian vessel. "Permission granted," Minho said with a small smile. "Go save some lives." As the rescue ships launched, Minho thought about Ensign Kira Huang and the 3,846 other humans who had died at Velkari Prime. He thought about their families, about the grief and loss that could never be fully healed. But he also thought about the millions of lives that had been saved because of their sacrifice. The Velkari civilization that still existed, the colonies that had been protected, the species that had been rescued. Was it worth it? Yuna asked quietly, as if reading his thoughts. Minho watched the rescue ships disappear into faster-than-light space, racing to save strangers they had never met. He thought about how the galaxy had changed, how species that had once ignored each other's suffering now rushed to help, how the simple act of answering one distress call had inspired an entire civilization shift. "Yes," he said finally, "it was worth it. Every life lost, every ship destroyed, every sacrifice made, because we didn't just save the Velkari. We reminded the galaxy what it means to be civilized. We showed them that strength without compassion is just tyranny, and that the measure of a civilization isn't its weapons or its territory, but who it chooses to protect. Yuna nodded, her eyes distant. Do you think they understand that? The people who died at Velkari Prime? I think they knew it before they went, Minho said. That's why they went. They understood that some things are worth fighting for, even worth dying for. And being the kind of species that helps strangers in need, that's worth everything. In the months and years that followed, the Mutual Defense Initiative continued to grow. More species joined. More lives were saved. The galaxy didn't become perfect. Problems and conflicts still existed, but it became better, kinder, more willing to help. And whenever someone sent a distress call into the void, they knew that somewhere, someone would hear it. Someone would come. The galaxy had learned humanity's lesson. When someone calls for help, we answer, always.